Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's session. I'd like to thank the VRAR Association for having us today. My name is Jenna Seiden, and I am an entertainment and technology consultant, and I will be moderating this virtual fireside chat, if you will, with my friends from Felix and Paul Studios. Felix and Paul is a studio that has done everything from cinematic VR to real-time interactive, and that's what we'll be talking about today. We'll also be discussing cross-platform in terms of how they approach projects from a development standpoint, production and distribution in terms of cross-platform. And lastly, we'll look at everything from the angle of pre and post-COVID. So with that, I would like to introduce you to my friends at Felix and Paul Studios. First, Paul Raphael, co-founder and co-creative director, and Pierre Blaizeau, who is the head of technology. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So a lot of people know about this amazing Emmy award-winning studio. You've done everything from working with Cirque du Soleil to what we're going to share with everyone today, your work on space explorers with NASA and other amazing stakeholders, as well as an AR project, the Storyteller with Jim Henson's company as well. But can you refresh everyone's memory for those folks who haven't been stalking you as much as I do? Because full disclosure, I am fortunate to be an advisor to your company. But can you update everybody on when the studio was founded and how you approach storytelling, and we'll go from there and jump into the two projects.
For sure. So Felix and I founded the studio in 2013 with Stéphane Ritsuy. Basically, we came from a good decade of exploring immersive storytelling in various media pre-VR. So this would be pre-2012 to 2013. We were really focused and fascinated by the way presence and immersion really shifted what storytelling was and how it operated, and how it really can affect someone's core in a much more visceral way. And yet that took a whole reevaluating of what the tools to do that, or the techniques to do that from a creative standpoint. And of course, from a technological standpoint, in 2012, when we started exploring virtual reality, we came, like I said, from an immersive background, but we also had a lot of history in film. And so we wanted to approach it really from a live action perspective, which at the time, there just was nothing like that. There were a lot of real-time rendered experiences, mostly games. But we wanted to bring the real world into virtual reality, and so at the time that also meant creating new technology, so cameras, and a whole way to basically assemble the images from the multiple lens cameras that we were developing, and like I said earlier, creating an entire new cinematic language. So that's what we started doing in 2013, basically, is when we founded the studio. And since then, we've done over 25 cinematic virtual reality experiences, and have, over the last couple of years, also expanded into also exploring more interactive, real-time rendered experiences, such as the one that we'll be talking about in a little bit.
Wonderful. And Pierre, you recently joined the company within the last year or two, if that's correct. And I look forward to hearing more about the technology side of things and other things. Would you like to introduce yourself as well a little further for our audience today?
Sure. Well, I joined the Felix and Paul adventure, as you said, a little bit more than a year ago. Moving in from the post-production and video game industry. So to me, the interesting part was to transition the studio from linear VR and 360 experience to real-time and interactive ones. So we are looking into augmented reality, mixed reality, and also interactive virtual reality experiences. And the first project that I've been lucky to work on is the Jim Henson Storyteller experience, 7 Raven.
Wonderful. What a way to come in. That's fantastic. So that's a little bit of a tease for later. But let's go to space. Let's do that first. Paul, as you have said, this project, Space Explorers, could be, and I'll quote you, sort of the holy grail of VR. The ability to be able to take people to space is something I think we have an obligation to do, and it's a wonderful time for it. So how does Space Explorers, which is a 4-episode series, the first 2 episodes were shot on Earth, the 2 others coming soon were shot on the International Space Station. Based on what you just told us about presence, how does Space Explorers really capture that in storytelling for you guys?
Well, just a small correction. So we actually shot 2 episodes on Earth, and there are 4 upcoming episodes on the ISS.
Wow.
And well, really, this is a project that was what we've been wanting to do pretty much since we began our foray into virtual reality. The whole premise behind what we are at the studio is really putting people in situations that they couldn't be in, and that's true for fiction, and that's true for documentary. The very first thing we ever did was put you in the presence of a musician as he composed a piece of music, and then we explored the world of nomadic cultures around the world. Put you face to face with a dinosaur, even though that was fiction. The point here wasn't so much a story as it was that moment of connection with the Apatosaurus, and then later with Blue the Velociraptor. But space was always for us the holy grail, in the sense that, human beings have evolved, as we all know, from the sea to the land, and we are now taking our very first steps off of land and into space and microgravity, and eventually no gravity. And that's going to change us. We may not change biologically very quickly, but it's certainly a very different way to live. And to be able to spend some time virtually, at least, and even myself, I haven't actually been to space. As close as I have is watching the footage we've been shooting. It really is this transformative experience that astronauts themselves have, when they see this, the footage, they're like, well, this is finally the first time we can show our family, or even the hundreds of people at NASA that work on these missions and don't get to go to space. I think this is one of the reasons NASA's been so supportive. Everyone who works at NASA is obviously a big fan of space, and for the first time, they can all actually get to experience in some way, and probably the best way so far, what that actually is.
That's wonderful. I was fortunate to do the trailer and see a lot of the other footage too, full disclosure. But I'm fascinated by space. I'm also scared of heights. I'm never going to space. But just being on the ISS and that feeling is just, it blew me away. And no offense to the other creators in our space who are telling the story in their own way. This was probably the most immersive, just looking down and just knowing where you are and looking down at Earth was just powerful. It's one of the things that has really moved me tremendously. And I've been in a headset as long as you guys have. So it's wonderful. What I think is very unique to your studio is your ability to work with a different range of partners, from well-known brands to these associations and organizations. I think the protocols of working with each, or the guidelines, are sort of similar in that a brand wants you to represent them in this light, and NASA not only needs you to represent them in X light, but they have certain scientific and legal and other operational protocols that you need to abide by. I think what's interesting, I'd love to hear from you, Pierre, is based on what Paul said earlier, that you are a studio that has built your own technology from underwater to other things. Now I'm assuming it took a while for you to maybe adapt some of the already approved cameras and technology on the ISS or for the program. So could you explain some of the technology that you are using of the cameras, and if that is the case, about how it took you from working with their existing approved products to your normal protocols of the Felix and Paul studio?
Sure. Well, first of all, as you mentioned, we are developing our own technology, but to bring that to space, unfortunately, our previous 4 generations of camera that we're using on the ground are massive, with a huge amount of lenses, and definitely not something that we can transport into space. Definitely not fitting in the ISS to comfortably move around, and representing an investment in terms of flight that is nowhere near what we can afford with our studio. So for the purpose of the ISS, we looked into partnering with Zcam and take their Zcam V1 Pro and unassemble and tweak it to match the requirements of our projects and the reality of being in the ISS. So some networking, thermal management and power management assembly was required to get to a complete camera system. And of course, this camera system can be completely driven remotely. So we have an SSC that is basically an approved laptop that is also used during different operations in the ISS that runs our backend software to drive the camera from the ISS or even remotely through a network connection. And we drive those operations from different places on the ground during the shooting sessions. That happens at the Felix and Paul studio, our partner NanoRacks, and also a department at NASA. So we are three ground operation connected to the ISS at the same time. And we are doing the due diligence of running the communications, of course. There's a lot of communication going through those points down to, up to the ISS at those moments. And it's also possible that we lose communication, of course. It's technology, so mostly it's not working. But there are some times where things are not working anymore in terms of connections. And we have special modes that the crew can operate the camera themselves. It's very
oh wow, they can operate it themselves. So it's not always, okay, so if they need to do something, okay, wonderful. And is there a difference between the internal camera and an external outside of the ISS as well? Can they operate, I'm assuming they're different cameras inside versus outside.
Yes, for the moment, the camera that we have sent so far is only inside the ISS. We are finishing the last round of tests of an EVA, so a camera that will be mounted on the Canada arm and shooting spacewalks and shots from distance of the space station and Earth. And that's going to fly in the middle of next month. So same thing, we are gonna, of course, this one will be differently operated, still through remote connections, and also being able to be operated in case of communication breakdown, which might happen more often because of the fact that the camera will be external. And at some moments that we have already mocked up in terms of movements outside of the station, at some point we're expecting to lose communication with the camera. And of course, we're going to start those operations before we know we're going to lose communication, but in case of a problem, we have also mechanical ways to operate from the ISS itself. Exactly like the astronauts would do if we break communication inside the ISS. They have buttons on the camera that they can operate themselves.
I hope they press the right button in that scenario.
A lot of buttons in there. So far, so good. So far, so good. We have like more than 200, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have more than 200 shots already done inside the ISS. And we had issues many times, and we have been able to recover all the times.
Well, that's good. That goes to me assuming as well, and I am making a bunch of assumptions. These are not things that you prep me with, you have hundreds of hours of footage at the end of this. And I know, and thank you, Paul, for correcting me. I didn't finish my coffee yet today, that there are 4 upcoming episodes as well. So tell me about how you plan. Do you plan on leveraging more of that footage? Because I'm assuming the 2 episodes plus the 4, you'll have other content that you can use. So what is your plan for distribution for those 4 episodes, those 6 episodes total? And then how will you approach sharing those with the community? And what about that extra footage? Because it seems so, precious to have that, to have this unique position to be working with NASA for so long. That puts you, it's a point of, it's an advantage with, against, not against, but with other studios that you actually have this access. So walk me through a little bit about the distribution of these 6 episodes and how you would like to look at the other precious footage that you have.
So obviously we've, having done virtual reality for all these years, we're going to be releasing the content in virtual reality. So the first episode's coming out in a couple of weeks, and then we're going to have a new episode per quarter. So it's about a year rollout. We are also releasing the experience as a 2 episodes. So we're going to take the 4 ISS episodes and make a 2-part experience, a 2-part series for domes. And we're also partnering with the Telco Alliance to release it on millions of phones worldwide using 5G and basically smartphones and headsets.
Wow.
And we're also working on a version for traditional screens, so for TV. So the way that works is basically we're capturing at a very high resolution in all directions. And so we can create virtual cameras within the footage, which basically we can direct the camera movement after the fact back here on Earth and create these really beautiful shots that give you this sense of weightlessness where the camera can basically rotate in any direction we want with very, very high precision. It's really something that's not as I think effective on footage you might shoot on Earth, but when you're in 0G, having the ability to do whatever you want with your footage, especially considering the fact that you usually do not have a professional cameraman on board, and even though the astronauts have been amazing to work with, their time is limited as well. And even if you wanted to have a beautiful camera shot, it's a lot more practical for them to just put a 360 camera down and for you to kind of direct the camera movement from Earth. We're also going to be doing some live streaming. So that's also technology that we'll have the capability to do. And we're planning on leaving the cameras up there. So although our main interest, especially myself as creative director, was to create this series, the technology we've developed is rather valuable for NASA, and we've found out for other companies out there, other entities, potential partners who may need to shoot, whether it be VR footage or, like I said, you can get some really amazing and versatile 2-dimensional footage as well, domes I mentioned. And the other thing that's, I think, quite valuable is the relationship that we've developed with NASA and the other basically space, whether it's in the private or public sector. We've been working for the past 4 years now with all these companies and entities, and just the protocols, the shorthand. There's so many layers to being able to shoot up there that if we can help others kind of fast track through that, I think that's something that is pretty cool.
If I may add,
Please.
The level of trust that we built over the years with all those partners, being like in the NASA or the private sectors around the NASA, that we brought on this adventure has been really precious and granted us the status of implementation partner with the national labs. So we got the opportunity recently, and this opportunity is still open, as you mentioned, the camera is staying up there. So we have few commercial content that we are already putting together with those partners in this beautiful status.
A lot of people produce content and think about distribution after. In the case of the stakeholders that you're working with and these relationships that you have cultivated for years, to be able to have thought about this portfolio of channels of how you can distribute the content and be able to work with them so that you can get through approvals and just be able to refashion that content for domes, for traditional 2D and very exciting, your telco partnership as well. It's not exploiting the content, it's creating that content natively for the right platforms. And a lot of folks are short-sighted in doing that. And I find what you guys do is you're 5 minutes ahead of everybody, thinking about where you're going to be putting that content so that your discussions with these partners are so meaningful, which is really good, versus having to come back in and skin the cat after, which is not fun to do. I want to get to our next product, but the last question I want regarding the discussion around Space Explorers specifically is, and I do think it's going to be a different answer when I ask this regarding the Storyteller, has COVID affected, pre and post COVID, affected your approach to any of this? It seems that we'll hear a little bit more later from the AR project that it definitely has, but just was curious as we sort of wrap up this part of the discussion, if there's any key learnings or key things that you've done differently now with this topsy-turvy world we're now in.
Mm-hmm. Well, for a little while, we were kind of joking that we might be the only people still shooting anything in production.
You might have been.
When we were shooting on the ISS, everything was already remote. We were, well into production. So in terms of shooting on the ISS, it literally went on without a hitch. We did have to transition from working in a studio to working at home. So, the post-production, the coordination between the team, that all went through a bit of a restructuring, but that went fairly smoothly as well. And in terms of the release of the project, I think the dome release is a little bit up in the air right now. We're still figuring out which domes are going to open when. But for all the other outputs, we're fairly lucky. We've been very lucky so far. And actually, I would also add that the technology we've developed to shoot remotely from the Earth to the ISS is actually pretty useful now on Earth. I mean, we can literally monitor and direct and do almost everything you need to do from a distance. Of course, you always will need someone to put the camera somewhere, and there's always a minimal amount of prep for any shoot. But considering that the directors and a large part of the crew don't have to be there, that's pretty cool. And we've already explored ways to bring that technology to Earth, which is kind of a story you often hear: space technology trickling down to Earth, and there you go. It's a real thing.
Well, that's I don't want to say happy accident, but that again speaks to the planning and thinking, sort of scaling the tech and what it can be used for. And I don't want to think that you knew COVID was going to happen, that you planned for that, but that you're able to be able to have this video pivot for such things. Well, then let's jump into what I think is one of the most exciting new projects that folks may hear for the first time if they haven't seen little trickles of it in the media, is this AR project with a Jim Henson company called the Storyteller. Could you tell us a little bit about what this platform is?
Sure. So when we set on working on our first non-cinematic VR project, I wasn't expecting it to be AR. I thought we would first do something in VR, but it turned out to be, you've always got a bunch of projects in development, and that's the one that really took off. And really, the idea here is, how do you take, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about AR and what it was and what it needed to be. And first thing that was important to us is, how do you create a visceral connection and the sense of presence in a situation where, you know, we're used to VR, where you control everything the viewer sees, right? Their full environment. You take them and you drop them somewhere else. And now all of a sudden you're only bringing something into their environment. So if they're in their living room or wherever they might be, you don't control that anymore. And it's kind of funny because I remember so many filmmakers talking about the fact that, you know, VR is a challenge because you don't have a frame, you can't, you know, kind of direct the gaze as easily as you do. And, you know, to me, that's VR is fine, but AR was the real challenge. But what we came to realize is that, you know, you've seen so many of these projects where there's these portals or just, you know, kind of projecting elements in your living room without any real integration or justification. And so we really wanted to create a context for the AR. And we also wanted to create more of a visceral, physical, tactile connection. And that's where the idea of a book came from, an augmented reality book. Of course, there have been augmented reality books for years. But what we wanted to do here was create, you know, this really seamless experience where you could basically, once the app is running, and anyone's wearing either whether it's a headset or we're also, I'll talk about this later, but we'll also be exploring handhelds, tablets, and smartphones as well as the VR version. But we wanted it to be completely stripped of any UI, and essentially you've got a book in front of you, and it'll behave in every way that you would expect. So you know, you move the story forward by turning the pages, contracting and expanding each tableau as you turn the pages. The little world that you're holding in your hands reacts to the physics and every movement that you do. In fact, there are some interactive elements that you know, that you can unlock, and some Easter eggs by the way you manipulate the book. And you know, a book is a very you know, everyone knows that when you're going to crack open a book, you're going to travel somewhere else. You know, it's a ritual that we're all used to, and that also really helps, we find, believe in that world and set the expectation and really, you know, create a real sense of immersion there. So that was what led us to, all right, let's do an augmented reality book. That was the initial idea. Let's really like think about it from every single possible angle. And we were actually in conversations with the Jim Henson company at that time, interestingly, about adapting a book into a film or a virtual reality experience. And that project, we never really fully cracked. But while we were talking about it, we're like, hey, how about taking one of your, you know, TV properties and adapting it into a book? You know, why don't we go? This is not
I've been in those meetings. I get it.
Yeah, and Lisa Henson, who's the most wonderful person.
She's a gem. She's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely love the idea, and so that's how we settled on the Storyteller, and the first story being The Seven Ravens, which is an adaptation of the Brothers Grimm
wonderful
version of the story. Yeah.
Got it. Very cool. So Pierre, what how do we see this? What headset, what tech are we using, and how did you approach this project? Since, as you mentioned, you came in right when this project was starting. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the technology and partners on this one.
Well, the first targeted platform is the Magic Leap. So that, as any real-time development project, you pick a target platform, the most ambitious one or the less ambitious one, usually not in the middle, to get all the features in. So for the augmented reality, or mixed reality, I should say, platform, we are using the Magic Leap. For the game engine, we are using Unreal Engine. And for all the tracking mechanism, we have developed our own tracking technology that we will use not only on the Magic Leap, but we'll use also on other platforms when the physical book will be involved. So it was really important for us to use our own technology, not just as as a desire to spend a lot of energy into this, but just because there were not existing solutions that would track not only a graphic pattern on a fixed image, which there's many solutions for that, but a solution that would do that in two instances of a physical element, and most importantly, the articulated aspect of those two elements. So the fact that those two pages are linked by a spine, and that you have several pages that you need to track and predict and assume the position of the whole object, which is the book and the page that are visible from your point of view.
Is this a social experience, or is this a social experience?
Well, actually, we are developing the multi-platform aspect as a social experience. So you could, of course, with one book, have your single player experience, and with a partner would be using the same device, or let's say a tablet or a smartphone could contemplate the same content synchronized between the two devices. Of course, only one person could interact with the physical object, or you can fight for it. The reality is that you could have several people watching the story revolved around one physical object.
I think that's really important to be approaching this and making sure that you're taking into account the social nature of this experience. And we have about less than 5 minutes left, and I do want to talk to Paul a little bit about the distribution for this, because this is sort of related to the COVID discussion as well, because I believe the initial plan was to partner more of a location-based entertainment experience to debut it or get it out there so that people can see it, besides, obviously a home release. So can you speak and combine those two topics about the distribution and the challenges pre and post COVID for this project?
Sure. So the initial release of the project was meant to be at the New York City Public Library and following that, libraries worldwide. So that plan, we still hope to do that. That's currently on hold. We did always plan to also release the project on other platforms, but that timeline has been compressed. So the first output very well may be the home version, and so for that we're like I mentioned earlier, there's the Magic Leap version, which is the first version that we built. However, there's no installed user base for that right now, not a significant one. So we're looking at smartphones and tablets as really the most accessible platform, as well as a virtual reality version. Now, for the VR version, as well as for the iOS and Android versions, we're actually going to have a version with no physical book. So a virtual book, a fully virtual book. You can also do the physical book with handheld devices, but we're also working on a way so that, just to reduce a bit of the friction there of having to get the book. We've spent a lot of time developing a hand tracking gesture-based UX, which I think is really quite cool. I think it's hard to beat the holding a physical book, but the version, the way we've kind of made it work with hands, where the book is kind of this magical living object, is also quite cool. And I'm excited to get that out there. So, we've definitely been affected in that sense by COVID, but not in any terminal way. So we're just
good.
rolling with the punches.
That's good. Yeah. I'm glad you're doing that, and I hope everybody is doing that. I personally love the business models involved in all these things. I think that's going to be part 2 of this conversation. Next conference, we have an opportunity to discuss those things, because the approach, and now pivoting, with all these new models, Oculus announcing subscriptions and telcos, how that works. To me, that's fascinating just as much as storytelling and presence and the tech. All these elements have to work together, and we'll get there. But as we wrap up, this platform and the first book we just discussed is the first of many that you will be rolling out. All these different funnels for the stories coming from the ISS, from storytellers to space explorers to the storyteller. You need partners, and you guys are probably someone that most other partners don't need to do a lot of diligence on and stress testing, because you sort of nailed working with partners. But going forward, who are the types of strategic or financial or distribution partners you're looking for as a sort of call to action? If there's anyone listening today that is interested in these projects, who has a distribution platform or might find some organic, authentic partnership, I'm sure you'd love to hear from them. So what are you looking for as we wrap up today's session?
For sure. Well, on the space front, if you'd like to inquire about distributing the project, I've mentioned the different platforms. So VR, domes, definitely reach out. We're actually shopping around the 2D version right now. So the different streamers, network, studios, if you're interested, reach out. And also, if you're in any way interested in our capabilities of shooting in 360 in space, which can be, again, very useful for 2D as well, whether it be for training or entertainment or educational content, you can probably imagine all the different ways that could be useful. On the storyteller front, well, the Seven Ravens is the first piece we've done. That is the first in a series of Jim Henson storyteller experiences we want to make. But we're also talking to different, again, studios and IP holders about adapting their content, so it doesn't have to be Jim Henson storyteller, of course. And we're also exploring educational and training with this. We really, our ambitions here with developing this book tracking technology and UX and all the knowledge we've developed creating this first experience is quite larger than this single experience. So if any of that sounds interesting to anyone listening out there, definitely reach out.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us a little glimpse into the latest with the studio. Paul, thank you for joining us from Germany, if I'm correct today. And Pierre, are you home in Montreal? Is that correct?
I'm home in Montreal, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, here from LA, everyone is safe. I hope you all stay safe, stay well, stay healthy. And again, everyone, please look forward to these amazing projects coming from Felix and Paul Studios, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.